Hello, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching Gulf Today on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories coming out of the West Asian region. The Israeli army says the Red Cross has taken custody of a hostage's body from Gaza under the current ceasefire deal. The remains are being transferred to Israeli troops following coordination with Hamas and humanitarian officials. Iran's embassy in Mexico rejects US and Israeli claims it planned to assassinate Israel's ambassador in Mexico City. Tehran calls the allegation a big lie aimed at damaging relations between Iran and Mexico. The United States and Britain have lifted sanctions on Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara and Interior Minister Anas Khattab. The move follows a UN decision ahead of al-Shara's planned meeting with President Trump next week. US intelligence found Israeli military lawyers had warned of evidence supporting war crimes charges over the Gaza campaign. 5 former officials say the report revealed doubts inside Israel's ranks that contradicted its public defense of the war. The United Nations says Gaza remains in crisis despite delivering over 37,000 tons of aid since the ceasefire. Access is still limited to 2 crossings as millions face shortages of food, water and medicine. Israel denounces Turkey's arrest warrants for genocide against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and 36 other officials. Foreign Minister Gideon Saar calls the move a PR stunt by Turkish President Erdogan after warrants were issued over the Gaza war. 5 people are killed and 6 others wounded in cross-border fire between Afghan and Pakistani forces, according to an Afghan health official. Both countries blame each other for the latest violence along the Kandahar-Balochistan frontier. The title sponsor of Israel Premier Tech has ended its partnership despite the team's planned rebrand for 2026. The Israeli licensed cycling team has faced protests over its participation in international races. Now those are the headlines for the hour, but we start with our top story today. And the United Nations has warned that Gaza remains in urgent need of humanitarian aid despite recent aid deliveries. UN humanitarian chief Tom Fletcher urged Israel to immediately open more crossings into the famine-stricken enclave to allow thousands of aid trucks to enter. He added that 190,000 metric tons of food and medical supplies are waiting at the borders, but current deliveries fall far short of what is needed to avert a humanitarian catastrophe. According to reports, since the October the 10th ceasefire, the UN and partners have delivered 37,000 metric tons of aid, reaching around 1 million people. However, access remains limited to just 2 crossings, while northern Gaza and non-government organization personnel still faced restrictions. UN spokesperson Farhan Haq stressed that urgent needs still remain intense and impotence to aid are slowing relief efforts. We're now joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at the Hudson Institute and he joins us live from Tokyo in Japan. Now, of course, Dr. Nagao, this ceasefire has been in effect since October the 10th. And what the first phase does state is the free flowing of aid, humanitarian aid, into the enclave of Gaza. However, free flowing in theory has not been happening in practice. Of course, only 2 crossings remain open, and some sources state that only 1/6 of the aid needed to get into the enclave is being let in. Why is this aid still being restricted, and how?
Of course, the number of the open gate is a way to limit the flow of the material. That is true. But at the same time, there is a risk that if Israel opens all of the gates, so that's why they worry about this, I think. Firstly, because if all of the gate will open, and many material will go to the Gaza, of course, there is a possibility Hamas smuggle the weapon or other material for the military purpose they can get through this flow of the material. If the flow of the material is too much, it is impossible to check all of the details. So that's why the limited gate and the flow is limited is legitimizable. But at the same time, the view from the situation, indeed, even if the 2 gates, indeed, huge material has already entered this area. So why this hasn't delivered all sides of the Gaza? Because the transportation inside of the Gaza itself has already destroyed. And at the same time, law and order situation inside of the Gaza is already destroyed. So okay. That's why even if the material enters the Gaza, some looting has happened, or people who live near the gate get all of the material, and this material will not going to the deep inside of the Gaza. That is a problem, I think. So okay. How to deliver is indeed matter. So international, multinational force, if they deploy in the deep inside of the Gaza, start to govern, the situation will improve, even if the gate is number of the gate is limited.
Yeah, but Dr. Nagao, Tom Fletcher, the UN humanitarian chief, has said that 190,000 metric tons of food and medical supplies are waiting at the borders. Of course, this ceasefire deal calls for the free flow of aid. Israel seemingly has not been adhering to letting that happen. What does that say about the current state of the ceasefire, and also, of course, the international response to that?
Of course, there is a possibility it is true, but at the same time, the UN attitude last some years indicated that they are not completely neutral. So that's why if the United Nations say that this is a material they prepared and not going to the Gaza, and this is safe material, it is very difficult to identify this is really the neutral information. And so that's why, for example, some of the member could be the Hamas cooperatives, something. So in this case, they can smuggle, even if the leadership of the United Nations do not intend to do that. So that's why the gate is limited, security is needed. It's one logical thing of the military operation is understandable. And at the same time, in this case, the negotiation process is also important. Hamas hasn't returned all the dead hostages. So that's why this is the situation, a little bit delays the process. So in this case, even if in the plan, there's a possibility that they are planning, originally they are planning to open, but because of the process is delaying, the opening itself is delaying, could happen. So that's why if this process should be more faster. Of course, in this case, negotiation itself should be negotiation process should be faster, and after that it will slow. International multinational forces, if start to deploy this area, and instead of the Hamas, they try to deliver the food. Or in this case, maybe situation will improve drastically. In this case, the second stage is very important, and as soon as possible, it should enter the second stage, I think.
Yes, Dr. Nagal, do stay with us as we have further updates coming out of the Middle East. And the United States and Israel on Friday accused Iran of trying to kill Israel's ambassador to Mexico, with Tehran rejecting the claim as a big lie and the Mexican government saying it was unaware of the plot. The purported assassination attempt came as tensions soared to new highs between Israel and Iran, which have attacked the other's territory. Israel said Mexican authorities had intervened to stop the attempt to kill its ambassador, Inat Kranz-Niger. But Mexico's foreign ministry later said it had received no information on the alleged incident. Mexico historically seeks non-intervention in international affairs and has taken a more cautious stance on the Gaza war than other leftist-led Latin American countries. Mexico has backed an investigation into allegations of Israeli war crimes, but has also maintained diplomatic relations with Israel, which were established decades ago and have largely been cordial. Dr. Nagal joins us once again. Dr. Nagal, of course, Iran has denied the claims that it planned to kill Israel's ambassador to Mexico in the capital. However, if they were true, what would Iran's motive be here?
Indeed, I do not have the evidence about Iran's plot in Mexico, but at the same time, as a Japanese, I need to say in 1991, there is one incident has happened, and the Japanese believe Iran committed terrorism. Because at that time, the Salman Rushdie's book has published, and the leader of Iran said this book is violating the Islam, and so that author should be killed. So death penalty, he said. So that's why he was hired. But at the same time, in Japan, what happened is one of the professors in the Tsukuba University translated this book to Japanese. And after that, that professor was found dead in the elevator in the Tsukuba University. So view from this, even if in Japan such kind of the incident that happened, and there is no evidence, but the people believe this is a crime of the Iran. So that's why if Mexico says Iran's plot exists, or Israel says Iran's plot exists, view from this incident in Japan indicate that there is a possibility Iran is committing such a kind of incident. So that's why I do not have the detail of this incident in Mexico, but still there is a possibility they committed it.
Well, and Dr. Nagal, Iran has called the plot a big lie. What might Tehran's denial signal to the wider region here?
In case of the assassination, there is a possibility that in this region, Iran or around Iran, indeed quite often they have committed. So view from the other country, this is illegal in the international law, European-based culture, this is illegal or something like that could happen. But at the same time, view from them, hurdle is very low. So that could happen. So this is a cultural gap. So I'm not sure why Iran committed it, because Iran believed this is a violation against something they believe. But at the same time, view from us, this is not. So that is a gap of the perception.
Yes, Dr. Satoru Nagal, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to have you on the program. And now we move on. And Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has recently stated that although Tehran seeks peace, it will not abandon its nuclear or missile programs. His comments come after US President Donald Trump claimed this week that Iran had asked on the possibility of American sanctions to be lifted. While hosting a meeting with economic professionals, Pezeshkian has further stressed that Iran is open to talks under international frameworks, but it rejects conditions that limit its scientific or defensive rights. Let's listen in to what he said.
ما نمیخوایم دعوا کنیم. ما از روز اول اومدیم، ما قصد دعوا کردیم. ما میخوایم تو این دنیا با صلح و امنیت زندگی کنیم. اما قرار نیست با ذلت زندگی کنیم. قرار نیست اونا هر چی دلشون خواست تحمیل بکنند و ما نوکری اونا رو بکنیم. همان گونه که شما میتوانید، مردم ایران ما میتوانند و ما میتوانیم کشوری درست کنیم آباد و سربلند و با قدرت بریم.
The Iranian president has also reiterated that his nation will not negotiate on missiles or the enrichment of uranium, viewing these as core defensive measures. Additionally, he has raised concerns over the country's arming Israel, yet constraining Iran's missile program and carrying out strikes on its nuclear facilities. Let's take a listen in.
ما با دنیا هم دعوا نداریم. 100 بار بهشون گفتیم ولی اونا نمیخوان ما سر پا بایستیم. میگن شما بیایید موشکی رو ما هم بحث کنیم. خب بحث کردیم. اسرائیل رو اونجا مجهز کنن. ما رو اینجا بگم موشک هم نداشته باش. دفاع هم نکن.
Now, in a related development, UN sanctions were reimposed in September following the expiration of the 2015 nuclear deal. These sanctions target Iran's nuclear and missile programs amid the return of America's maximum pressure policy. Okay, now joining us is Major General RGG Davidi. He is a defense analyst and he joins us live from the Indian capital of New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us, Major General Davidi, here on the program. The Iranian president, Pezeshkian, says Iran seeks peace but will not abandon its missile and nuclear programs. Of course, Pezeshkian also reiterating and seeking and talking about the fact that Israel, its counterpart in the Middle East, is being armed by the United States, by other Western nations. How do you interpret that balance?
Well, Thomas, firstly, always a pleasure to be on the NewsX world. Well, if you go into a little bit of background, you know, as far as Iran is concerned, its nuclear program is part of his strategic calculus, is part of his sovereignty and also national pride. And Iranian leadership feels that in case they have the nuclear capability, this gives them the bargaining power and also strategic rebalancing. So that's the background, and that's why even now Iranian president has very categorically stated that's a part of their own sovereignty, national pride, and they are not going to abandon the nuclear or missile program just because they are under pressure. Now, if we go back to 2015, the JCPOA, that is the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, agreement was signed. In that, the Iran was to temporarily halt its nuclear program, and in turn, the sanctions were to be lifted. But in 2018, the Americans withdrew because they found that Iran is not complying with the stated conditions. And therefore, now that's where the problems started to manifest again. And only in June this year, both Israel and American, they carried out joint strikes against Iranian nuclear installations and claimed to have caused considerable damage. Now, currently the situation is that as far as America and Israel are concerned, they are using deterrence to maximize in their position and ensure that Iranian come under pressure. On the other side, we have the E3 countries, that is UK, and Germany and France. They believe that the diplomacy is the way ahead. They also believe in limited sanctions, but they feel that this process can only be carried through, I would say, give and take diplomacy and not entirely through the pressure, which is the strategy of Israel and America. So I feel that the way ahead is only when there is a balanced diplomacy, that is, the Iranian interest is also kept in mind, their security is kept in mind. At the same time, it is ensured that there is no nuclear proliferation and Iran does not get the nuclear capability, because that will offset the strategic balance in the Middle East region at large. Thomas.
Yes, and of course Iran insists that these nuclear and missile programs are defensive and nuclear enrichment is peaceful. Does that claim hold any credibility given its missile reach and of course its regional influences through proxies like Hamas, Hezbollah and the Houthis?
Well, Thomas, first and foremost, when we talk of defensive capability, it also has the offensive element. So therefore, Iranian missile program is not totally defensive. It is offensive defense, means they have the capability to hit back, and therefore it can't be purely categorized as defense. The second point is that Iranians have been, supporting these, terrorist groups like Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah, and these have been the proxies which actually caused high degree of stability and turmoil in the Middle East region. The third point is that as far as the nuclear program of Iran is concerned, it's under a shadow, or I would say, it's under the scanner, because Iran has been very surreptitiously carrying out enrichment of uranium. They already achieved something like about 265 degree of enrichment, and they were very close to actually acquiring the capability when Americans and Israelis went in for strikes in June. So the point is that Iranian nuclear program is not totally transparent. There's a lot that is going on behind the curtain, and that's why the issue today is that there's no credibility as far as the compliance is concerned. Because after June, Iranians have not allowed any inspection teams to come and have a closer look at the program. So currently, there is a lack of trust, there is a high degree of lack of credibility on the both sides, and I feel that Iran must open up its installations, become more transparent, and only then we can see that this issue can be resolved. Otherwise, this issue will keep hanging as a, I would say, a trouble spot, and that's not good for the larger Middle East region, for the peace of the region. So I think diplomacy and deterrence have to go together, but the interest of Iranian must be also kept in mind, because they have high degree of concern about their security, especially when Israel is being armed both by West and US. Thomas.
Yes, Major General Gigi Davidi, thank you very much. Fascinating stuff. Thank you very much for taking the time. We now move on, and supporters have gathered at the rallies of the current Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani as one of his predecessors, Nouri al-Maliki, in Baghdad ahead of the Iraqi parliamentary elections scheduled on November the 11th. The outcome of the vote will influence whether Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani can serve a second term. Let's in fact listen in to what the Prime Minister and a State of Law coalition candidate has said on the issue.
ألا تسمحوا لأصحاب الأزمات أن يعودوا إليكم، ولا لأصحاب الكذب والتضليل أن يحدثوا بحياتكم ويبعثروا أحلامكم وطموحاتكم.
صار رسالة واضحة على وعي هذا الشعب من أجل أخذ حقوقه عبر عملية ديمقراطية سلسة وواضحة يشترك بها كل أطياف الشعب العراقي من أجل تشكيل حكومة تعمل على إنجاز الخدمات وتعمل على توزيع الفرص بشكل عادل والتقدم بالبلد نحو عيش مزدهر وحياة.
Now we move on, and the United States has removed Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara from a terrorist sanctions list ahead of his upcoming meeting with President Donald Trump that is scheduled for November the 10th. The move comes after the United Nations Security Council also removed al-Shara from a symbolic sanctions list, clearing obstacles to Syria's economic and political integration. Along with al-Shara, Syria's Interior Minister Anas Qassam Khattab, who was formerly linked to al-Qaeda, has been removed from the list as well. Meanwhile, the US Congress is working to repeal additional sanctions that still remain on Syria, with American lawmakers welcoming the removal of UN measures and supporting Syria's economic rebuilding. And that is a wrap on Gulf Today. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.